Guten Tag, meine Damen und Herren. Willkommen beim Filmmakers Live Italian Cinema Now. Sie wissen, italienisches Kino liegt uns sehr am Herzen und mit unseren Gästen werden wir auf Englisch reden und deshalb wechsle ich jetzt auch ins Englische. Thank you for being here to the Filmmakers Live Italian Cinema Now, talking about independent cinema in Italy today. And please welcome our guests, Marta Savina and Fulvio Risuleo. Please. So thank you for joining us today. Tuesday is always Italian Day, and we're starting this off, and we're rounding it up with your premiere tonight at 10 o'clock after the end of our Italian night. And you had the first experience yesterday with films that are showing. Your film is showing in the International Independence, Primadonna, and your film, Fulvio, is showing in Spotlight, Notte Fantasma. Films that are, of course, very different, but they are unique and special in your, definitely, two of you sharing independent sensibilities, and I would say a kind of international quality. There is an urge of you both to speak truly to international audiences. And I would like to maybe, as a first thing, for you to present your film. You know, what is the core of your film and how you wanted to reach audiences, where it started before this German premiere that we are featuring here at Munich. Please.
So yeah, my film Primadonna, I think the germ of it is an unexpected act of defiance in 1960s Sicily. So it's based on a true story, and yeah, it's just what happens when a young girl decides to go completely against the grain of society in a very unexpected way for the times. And I think for me, it was urgent to tell the story because I think we still need as a society these acts of defiance from women, from men, you know, because there are lots of things that don't work in our society, and so that was why I sort of like wanted to tell this story.
And my movie is set all in one night, so it's a movie about night and Rome. So the city is very important. And when I started to write this, I had in mind only the atmosphere, the mood, and tried to write very fastly the script, and without knowing how to produce it, only because I wanted to write this story. And I presented my producers with the idea to work with the main actor, Eduardo Pesce, that it's a friend also, that an actor that I admire, and they said, okay, this is a very smart movie to produce for them. So they decided to push it very fastly because it was very simple set, only 2 characters in one night, and they found the money from Sky Television. So I think sometimes it's difficult to say what does it mean independent, the word, because sometimes independent in Italy seems something is a movie without not a lot big budget. But for me, independent is if you had the money and you can use it in very free way. So this was good for me because we had the budget, the story, and a small production, very close to me, and we built together this movie in very freedom way. And after the movie was in Venice, so they decided not to take the movie only in television, but to push in the movie theater before the television. So this is a short story.
Now, I mean, you name it exactly right. There's creative freedom that is super important for you. And if your creative spirit through a fast script goes into a fast production, that's wonderful. Do you have the same feeling that you could really establish your creative vision without any hindrance?
Mostly, yes. I think so. I think it's always it's a bit about compromise, and I think you have to be very aware of what compromises you're accepting, because like it's you don't want to make the wrong compromises. But yeah, I completely agree with Fulvio's idea of independence. Like it is about how you invest the money and where you put your money. But I think like I was lucky to have a producer that Virginia Valsecchi, who was very respectful of my vision and what I wanted to do. And I think it's really about sort of being on the same page with what the movie is about and why do you really want to tell that story. Because I think if you have that strong vision at the beginning, then like all the choices that you're making, even the hard ones, when you have to sort of like find a compromise, then you're sort of like navigating those choices with like with the right vision ahead.
One other thing Fulvio mentioned is a very classical way of establishing Italian cinema, which is starting it in Venice. Your way was a totally different one, a super unclassic one. You started in London Film Festival, a festival we visited as a team last year, which is a fantastic festival. But I wonder, because Primadonna has so much to tell about Italian society, a harsh reflection on the situation for women in the 60s. So I really wondered, wow, how did that come about, London?
Well, they didn't want us in Venice, so that's how it came about in London.
Still, there's many A festivals,
no, absolutely.
And many festivals love your film.
No,
so
absolutely.
London is an interesting choice.
It was so first when London came about. First of all, like it was a special place for me because I moved from Florence to London when I was 20, and I kind of didn't know. It was a very particular moment in my life. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I had actually left. Weirdly enough, I was a violinist, so I left this musical career behind me, even if I was very young. I was 20 years old, and I just like left and went to London. And in London, I found out that what I wanted to do was to tell stories and become a filmmaker. So it was a really and then I moved to LA and I did other things. I moved on sort of, but when the BFI accepted the film, I thought it was somewhat, like coming full circle really, and so I was really happy to go there. But yes, it's very sort of like uncommon, but I think I'm very, like, in the worst possible sense, I'm very uncommon. As in, like, I'm always, outside of certain boxes. And I think the film has had, Primadonna, has always, like, maybe because it's about, the story of Primadonna is, like, about a woman doing exactly what she wants without compromises. And I think the movie has kind of, like, weirdly done that, you place so many expectations. It's kind of like with a child, you place so many expectations on that film, and then it does completely what he wants. And but it's been really beautiful to see its journey, and but I think like it's kind of like when you come up with stories at a certain point, you're writing and you have to sort of follow where that story and that characters lead you. You can't really force them into places, and so I think the journey of Primadonna has been kind of like that. It's a movie that just does whatever he wants.
Fulvio, because you were naming surprising artistic origins now, and I wondered, or I reflected in that moment on your film being in a sense very graphic. So very tableau, an absolute noir. So I wanted to ask you how it relates to your previous two films in the first, and how important imagery is for you.
This movie for me is the first movie that I done in the night. So when you film in the night, you have to build everything. you have to put the light, of course, because if you don't put the light, you don't see nothing. And so the idea is you have to think and visualize before a lot the images. And we spent a lot of time to do the location scouting, to find the light or the street light to cut off, to spegnere, come si dice? To turn off. And because the city, of course, has their own light. Sometimes is warm, sometimes is cold, sometimes is red. And to have the colors, the palette, very simple and without not that much colors, you have to think about the city. So for me, yes, it's a graphic movie. I don't know, maybe I do comics also in the same way, parallel way of cinema. I like a lot the graphic novels. So maybe it's why I sometimes I think in graphic way. But the idea is, I loved a lot filmed in the night because it's what it was like a theater, to be inside a theater, and we with the DOP Guido Mazzoni, we decided to think this trip in a way that was kind of oniric, but with the contrast of the actors that had to be very realistic, and so this mix was important for me.
Is it the third time that you work together with your DP?
The first time.
The first time.
Yes, because he's my friend, and we do together the other movie, but he was the first camera operator, the chief operator. And but and in my DOP of the first two movies was in the same school. We were all together in the National Film School of Rome, and but they were very different because they are very different. One is more for the improvisation, for the naturalistic light, and Guido is one of the person that I admire more in terms of techniques. He knows everything about techniques, how to use the techniques to create emotion. And so I decided to work with him because I needed something like that, a very big construction, but without, the audience have not to feel the construction, but it's important.
I mentioned international sensibilities, or speaking to a general audience. And to stay with your film, I would like to say that it is a Rome, a nocturnal Rome, but it is also something like the city, like a general city. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree. There are two cities in the movie. One is for the character, and one is for me, because the location of the movie are very important for me, because they are the place that where I live, where I spend my days, and it's very realistic in terms of trip, because the location in the reality are very close, and it's very, very realistic. But at the same time, it's not a touristic Rome, so it's not in the center, so everybody can think to the city of everybody, because there is a peripheric part, there is the station, there is the river, there is the city center. They are very common in all the big cities. So I like, because the Roman people say it's real Rome, and the people from the international say, oh, it's like my city. So I like it.
Okay. In your case, it is there is something, a combination, for example, that I would first like to mention, of a film from the Nordic countries that we play here, Unruly, and your film, that kind of have a connection and communicate with each other. And this is, of course, about a new feminist take on period pictures, very, very much. And this goes up to a film that is not showing here, but a film by Karim Aynous, his newest film about the last wife of Henry VIII, showing in Cannes. So, and there is a big discussion about how we have great feminine characters in history whose story is first told by being very accurate, or if we are reframing historical figures in a feminist sense. And of course, I see your film in the first sense very much. It's the first time that, is it the first time that this story, this specific story, is told in a cinematic way? Because it's so incredible that this young woman would stand up against a whole society, basically a whole landscape of established misogynistic values.
Well, actually, there was a 1970 film by Damiano Damiani called La moglie più bella, so like the most beautiful wife, which was loosely, well, sort of based on the same true story. But I think it's very interesting because I watched that film, and to me, that is so clearly a film told by a male perspective, clearly in 1970, so very, very close to when this happened, which is 1965. And I think it's the La moglie più bella and Primadonna are just such different films, you know, even that they're telling sort of the same events, but just from a script standpoint, they couldn't be more different. So to me, it's creatively, it's always like a really interesting challenge to sort of like reframe history through how we can now see it. You know, it's a very interesting prism, and yeah.
This definitely, history is always a construction, and we have in a certain way reconstruct, but it is a very interesting discussion, I find, how fiction and historical fact relate to each other. And I think you did a marvelous job in being super specific, you know. It's just, you know, how do you establish the fine line between dramatizing events and being in a historical accurate setting? I think that's very interesting because you pulled it off very much, and I think you have thought a lot about it, about a clear feminist perspective, but really being true to what happened.
Thank you, first of all. Yeah, no, it definitely, there was like a lot of thought behind the film. I actually started writing this film in 2017. So like right in and then the Me Too happened just like maybe after like 3 months that I'd started writing. So I feel like the script went through a lot of changes that were happening in the world, and it kind of like took them all in a way. But I was always very aware of where are we now at a political standpoint in the conversation about gender and about equality and about women. But at the same time, like I really didn't want the film to just like feel like, you know, a pamphlet or just an academic discussion about gender and about equality. So we definitely had a lot of creative conversations, really relating to color and to how were we going to do period, because we didn't want it to feel, I remember the word we used, we didn't want it to feel like a coat that you take out of the wardrobe in the winter and it kind of like smells like, you know. We really wanted to feel relatable and fresh, and so that creatively we tried to do through color and music and a lot of the elements that were pushing against the other period aspects of the film.
Just to be very clear for the audience who doesn't know about it, this is about Leah, who's being raped in the first place by the son of a bourgeois landowner, you could say, or a criminal, and the law permitted, if the rapist and the raped woman would later marry, that this would be egalized in front of the law.
Yeah. So there was a law in Italy that allowed a man who had raped a woman to not be persecuted if he offered to marry the woman. So that was quite horrific, but it was a custom, and so because all the value was put on the honor and the virginity of the woman, whenever she lost this virginity, the only thing that she could do and that was allowed by society was to actually get married, and so that really, she was the first woman to rebel against what was called this reparatory marriage, which, I mean, I think it's a fantastic way of expressing the like reparatory marriage, because you had to repair the honor you'd lost. And so she was the first one to rebel against this, and the law wasn't changed until 1981. So it took a very long time.
One last question, and then of course we go to a very male film, you could say. And this is the main cast of Claudia Guzmano. What's her quality? There's something that is very, I mean, extremely resistant, also very young, like a childlike gaze nearly. It's a very peculiar mixture. The casting is very interesting of her.
Yeah, I was really lucky. I got two fantastic casting directors, Sara Casani and Francesco Vedovati. They were really fantastic. Claudia actually shot the short film with me that was based on the same story. And then I kept her because, yeah, well, first of all, you would never guess her age. You said a childlike quality. She's 38.
Not in a negative sense, you know, like a pure gaze. Like
absolutely.
You know?
And we actually, no, absolutely. But we really worked a lot on, like, really cleaning her eyes a lot, because obviously she had the eyes of a grown woman, and she had to lose all that awareness. So we did a lot of work on that. But I think what really struck me about her, and I sort of like fought to keep her, because, you know, like, she's not a name actress, and sometimes producers and distributors, especially, you know, when you're dealing with independent films, they're trying to put a name actor to help with visibility and distribution. And I really wanted her, because I think what she has is, it's impossible. Like she's sort of like, she has an annoying quality, but it's impossible to hate her. And I think that was really interesting to me, because I didn't want a perfect hero character.
What is the quality of Eduardo Pesce being your anti-hero and meeting young Tarek in the night of Rome, being extremely tense as a policeman, and suddenly in this encounter he suddenly abducts young Tarek, and there is suggestions of extreme racism, extremely unresolved personal and psychological issues, and we don't know where this night ride will take us. So yeah, please tell us a bit about these totally contradictory characters and how you cast them.
Yes. Yeah, the idea was to have built set, but very improvising, realistic interpretation, and I decided to film the movie in the chronological order. So from the first scene to the last scene, in 5 weeks of work. And we done a lot of improvisation in the rehearsal, the weeks before, because Edoardo is a very important actor in Italy, but Tarek, Jotin Clavensani, the other actor that is 18 years old, was the first time that he was in a movie. He is very realistic, he knows how to play, but he has no experience, and so it was very important to me the relation between the two actors. So I choose him, the Jotin Clavensani, after the casting that I've done with Edoardo. So Edoardo Pesce, the main actor, helped me a lot with the casting. So I cast the main actors, the young actors, with him, and so I decided the couple. The couple was very important to me. That was also a strong couple in the reality, because they had to work together. And for me, the best quality of Edoardo Pesce is to let the other people with him to express themselves in a free way, because he don't think only about himself. He think about the scene. So together, I wrote the dialogues, of course. He loved the dialogues, but at the same time, sometimes we try to do very long scene and to change dialogues, to follow the flow, to create a realistic reaction of the dialogue. So we work a lot on this in these dialogues, because the script was a kind of theater play, because of a lot of dialogues and different location. So filming in the chronological way was great, because sometimes we change, sometimes we put some improvisation, sometimes the dialogue is like the script, very literally the same, but depends. So this was a kind of trip all together to understand if we are doing well or wrong.
Okay. So are you saying that these 5 weeks of shooting were all night shoots? No.
Yes, all night.
Oh God. A tired crew there, tired actors.
Yeah. But it was great because the night is silent, and Rome is not silent city. The night is empty. You can drive the car and go. It's very, except for the time that you have to sleep in the day. But everything is much more better. I love a lot to film in the night.
Are you a night person?
No, I'm not a night person. It was difficult to me to decide that. But maybe I want to become it.
Okay. By the way, do you have any questions for our 2 directors? At any given moment, please jump in, ask questions. Now, this is, as I said, a very male film. This is also a film, and maybe that is the same thing about power relations and shifting power relations and what it means to be a man, or what it means, and it is a journey to empathy. How would you say? Would you say that is the fact? Yeah. It's true.
It is a relation between 2 men, one young man and one is 40 years old, and I think that people are different, and when you grow up and you became old man, maybe you don't learn nothing, because it depends on you. There are people who are 20 years old that are much more interesting and deep than 80 years old people. And so the idea was that it create this couple. Of course, the experience of the life is different, but they are deep in a different way, so they help each other to understand things. And of course, it's important the power, because one is a policeman and the other one is a young guy. So the policeman has the power, but at the same time, this power, he uses it just to take the guy with him and to constrict him to talk, to make this conversation that maybe it's difficult in another way, because this man is lost in his ghosts. And of course, I live in this world, so I hear a lot of this discussion that is very important to me. This discussion to the male power, to be matched in the way that are very sick. And of course, I am very happy to live in this period of our history where everything is becoming more complex, more difficult to describe in a word. But I don't like to do this in a movie in a political way. But of course, I think this you can feel it through the word of the young man, that to me is more deep than the old man, and not only because he's not a policeman. Of course, two different works. And so I think I try to do a movie about our society without speaking about society, just speaking about people and emotions.
Leah is also surrounded by very complex people, including her own parents, isn't she? I mean, that's also one thing, as you said, like everything has become complex, and I think you're reflecting the complexity or the growing complexity of the discussion coming out of a very simple value system, and then complexity is added.
Yeah, I think it's, I completely agree with Fulvio. I think we're now in a world where it's hard to describe things with one word. It's much more complex than that, and I think sort of like our generation and the generation after ours are really living and embodying this complexity. And I think in cinema, especially, you know, like cinema is art, and I think we should be interested in the gray areas and in the complexities, because as humans we're extremely rarely black and white. We're extremely rarely, you know, like good and bad, and we're a mix of all these things. And I think that's very very interesting in the human nature, and it's something that in cinema you can really take risks. For example, like I was really interested in sort of like giving an alibi in a way to this guy who commits a horrible thing such as a rape, but to me he's not the bad guy in the story, because he's just a product of the time, and he sort of like ends up being the victim of the film in a way, because I thought that was an interesting way to reframe the question, and for the world that we live in. I don't think we should sort of like, I don't think cinema is probably like I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I think cinema should be free to just explore the gray areas and sort of problematize issues. Not necessarily giving like very clear answers, but sort of like offering up a picture and opening it up to discussion, I think.
Exploring the gray areas, would you say, in the most general sense, in the next 2-3 years, will it become more difficult to explore gray areas in Italian cinema? I'm mentioning it before because I can, for example, share the German situation. We're having a far right-wing party that suddenly in some areas is voted supposedly, or would be voted by 20% of the people. So, and I think the Italian situation is also a very complex one. And I think we live, as you say, in a wonderful time where we can explore gray areas. I think for all artists, it's a very peculiar time, isn't it? So how do you see the situation of financing new films and equally exploring and going deep and diving deep into the gray areas, into the complexity of human beings, and not simplicity of whatever a pure being might be? Pure is like the wrongest word, you know. We're not pure, we're so many things. So
I think it will be it is already challenging. It's always a challenge, and I think it will be challenging. But I'm really, really up for the fight, and I think we should all fight the fight to explore the gray areas. Italy is sort of like the financial way to put together films in Italy is mostly government, funded, and so I don't know how that's going to shape up in the next 3 to 5 years. But also, as a country, we have a history of very unstable government. So who knows? Like maybe in a year and a half, we'll have a whole new one.
And a history of very stable cinema at the same time.
Yeah.
In terms of great cinema.
I think that the way of the filmmakers to make home movie is to be radical, much more radical that they can. I think that is a good moment in Italy, in Rome. There is a lot of production, a lot of movie, and but for example, I don't like streaming platform. I don't like series. I like the idea to make movie for thinking about movie theater, thinking about international distribution, and it doesn't matter for me to have 190 country to put in a computer. I prefer to travel, to think about my movie that go in a small cinema there, and another small cinema in another country, and because I think that I trust a lot in the word art. I like cinema as an art. So I think that we, as a filmmaker, the crew, we have to try to think ourselves about the movie, about the society, about the emotion, and try to film our life and our country, and it's very important this. So yes, the industry is important. When one starts to make a movie to find the money, it's very important to think about in which situation we are and how it's possible to find 1 million, 2 million, 3 million to make a movie. But that is secondary. The most important thing is thinking about the right script, the right idea. That can be radical, it can be original, it can be something new that can talk to the people and help the people to understand something, help ourselves to understand something.
Thank you. Again, open to your questions, but I go on. We're reflecting on artificial intelligence a lot here at the festival. We have a whole pavilion where like artists are reflecting on that, both in the dystopian and the utopian sense. And I wonder, I think every artist nowadays looks at this in awe, amazement, a mix of maybe interestedness and anger, possibly fear. How do you look at our days, our times, because they are so incredibly changing so fast on that level as well, in terms of expression and tools of expression that kind of start to live by themselves somehow?
I think it's a new technology, as all the new technologies are very interesting things and less interesting. But I think that it's interesting to be afraid of that, because we can focus on our ideas, our personality, as a human. So we can take mistake, we can follow our dream during the night, something that is not logic. I think that is good to have this fear around us. We have not to trust to the images, and that is right, because we have not to trust to anything, because we have only we have to study every time. If we read an article, a newspaper, it's not the reality. It's a point of view. So we have to think, to study, to think around, to look around. So to think that exists in artificial intelligence is good, because we can be more safe, more quiet, to open our mouth and say anything.
Yeah, I think I saw like one of the signs from the WGA strike against AI that said, "Hey, AI has no childhood trauma," and I think that's interesting. I mean, I think it's good that we're sort of like scared about it, because as every new technology, there's a really good way to use it, and there's a really bad way of using it. And I've used like ChatGPT, and maybe I don't use it well, but I can never get it to do anything useful for me at all creatively. But obviously, you know, like we do live in a really, really fast-paced world where technologies develop at a like light speed velocity. So who knows what it is is going to become like tomorrow. And I think, but I'm thinking, you know, when sort of like digital cinema was coming in, and people, you know, like people were really scared about disappearance of film, and I think like now everybody, even in Italy, there are like some films still shot in 35 millimeters, and we were both talking this morning actually that we kind of like want to shoot next films on film. So there's a big return of what once, you know, we thought was going to disappear forever.
There are still laboratories in Italy for
There's
for
one.
film? Oh, there's
Augustus Color.
There one also other smaller. There is a market, and it's growing up.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting, because yeah, there are very, very
Of
few
course, with
laboratories.
Kodak.
Yes.
Only with Kodak.
Yes, of course. One last aspect maybe is how to find audience. Because you both are very much about cinema, theatrical experience, but the other thing is, in this fast-paced times, how to even reach people that want to go to cinema. And just yesterday we welcomed Cinema Troisi here for a discussion, and I think worldwide, one of the most marvelous experiences, judging only from afar so far, because I couldn't join the discussion yesterday, but we follow the Instagram very closely. It's like Cinema Troisi seems to have found some formula to attract people to the cinema. And what we always say as a festival, this is made by humans for humans. That's what we say. And this is first and foremost, cinema is a social experience. This is us sitting together, talking about cinema, watching films together. So how do you feel about cinema and luring people back in? Maybe it's a place, and then the connection to the filmmakers, and then fantastic films happening or fantastic experiences happening in this very place. So we first have to construct and reconstruct those cathedrals of communal experience. Or how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think the guys at the Troisi are doing like, we were actually in the car yesterday because we got picked up at the airport together. And I was literally telling them, like, I think it's one of the best things that have been done for the city of Rome. It really is a fantastic cinema, fantastic sort of like programming. And cinema is a communal experience, you know. Sometimes you share with 400 people, sometimes you share with 3, and it's equally special, and every time it's going to be different. You're gonna perceive that film differently. So I think what they're doing is to sort of well, first of all, they renovated a whole cinema, so it's a state-of-the-art cinema. So you go there, you pay a ticket, but you actually sit comfortably, watch a fantastic print of the film. It sounds great. And so I think these are important aspects. But also they do a festival in the summer, and they bring guests for like some older films, some retrospectives, some films that maybe you haven't seen in a while, you know. So I think they are able to really think outside the box. And then I think when you put that kind of care and enthusiasm, the audience will come. I really believe that.
Yes, I know very well the Troisi experience because it's not nothing new. They are 10 years that they are building this.
Overnight success, huh?
Yeah, they right. Started with to occupy a cinema after the summer cinema, and after 10 years they decide to create this movie theater. So I think all the experience had to be slow. The point is how to reach people, how to find an audience, and it's probably things very difficult to me and for maybe to the filmmaker to find a way to find the people, because sometimes when we write a movie, we film a movie, of course you think about some audience, but it's impossible to think about the way to distribute it, to communicate it, So this is the point. Sometimes we do a very great cinema in Italy. I think there are many directors that I follow a lot, but that movie are not showing sometimes in the movie theater, sometimes only in very small place. And that is, I think we have to invest a lot of this to build new cinemas, to build new experience, to show the movie, to focus because now there is a lot of confusion. There are many films, and the people don't know which one they have to see. There are too much, and so it's important to create something that can help the people to go to the movie.
To navigate it, curation. It's also important, I think, to have young cinema makers, you know, as you know, new voices in cinema itself. This has to be reflected in terms of connection from young cinema owners transmitting it, because we're talking about investing in state of the art. That's one thing, but then also talking in a voice that's relatable for a young, intellectual, in any way interested audience. And I think they are very young as a collective, aren't they?
Yeah, very young.
Yeah,
very young.
Yeah.
But I think they have a very sort of like transgenerational audience too. And I was actually in Sweden with Primadonna at this beautiful cinema, and they were telling me they were doing because they realized they had a kind of a senior audience, so they were doing these like tea time screenings, creating really like curating an event and choosing like sort of like tea time appropriate films, but I think it's a new way of thinking about cinema as an art form, of course, but also like as a space for people to come together and to experience something as a group.
Well, so thank you very much for being here. We have hopefully state-of-the-art cinemas for your films
Absolutely,
to
yes,
be shown.
absolutely.
And Primadonna is showing again tomorrow. That is Wednesday at 5 o'clock. And Notte Fantasma has its premiere here in Munich tonight, nighttime, nocturnal premiere of Notte Fantasma at 10 o'clock. Thank you very much, Fulvio Risuleo, and thank you so much, Marta Savina, for being here.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much. Thank you.